Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brick Railway Builders Podcast, a podcast all about Lego trains. This is an interview-style podcast where I introduce everyone in the hobby to everyone. Joining me for this episode is a fellow LUKR member. It is TechnoAndrew. Hello, Andrew. How are you doing?
Hi, Luke. I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
It is an absolute pleasure. I know that a lot of people will be very excited to watch this episode because I do know that when it comes to certain Lego train circles, your name and your models do come up in conversation quite a lot. So I reckon it's going to be a very exciting podcast.
You're very kind. Yes, I did hear some of the previous episodes where a couple of guys did mention me, and it's always nice to know that I've inspired people with my work.
So with that, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Andrew. I live in the UK. I tend to go by TechnoAndrew on some of the online stuff like YouTube and Flickr. But yeah, I've been building Lego trains as long as I can remember, really. Pretty much ever since I was old enough to pick up Duplo bricks.
So what can you tell us about your current Lego train collection?
Yeah, absolutely. So I predominantly make British trains, although I have dabbled into some international stuff as well. So my main passion is building British steam locomotives. I build them in the 7 wide scale because I found that's kind of the best compromise between size and detail, etc. Also, the main thing I tend to build is steam engines. I have dabbled in other things, as I said. So in terms of non-British stuff, I did build a model of the loco from Back to the Future. That was for a certain video, which some people might be familiar with, where I ended up launching it out of my upper story bedroom window in slow motion. That was good fun. And then when the Disney train set came out from official Lego, I saw that and thought, oh, I can have a bit of a play with that. So I've done a bit of American Disneyland railroad modeling. But otherwise, yeah, for the most part, it's going to be Steam. In terms of non-Steam builds I've done, I've done an O8 shunter because obviously everyone has to do an O8 shunter at some point. It's kind of obligatory at this point. The other main one I've done is I've made an electric train, which is a model of the train I used to get to secondary school back in the sort of early 2000s. That's an EMU, a Class 455 to be exact, in Southwest Trains livery. It doesn't really it doesn't go out to shows that often because it's a bit unwieldy. It's kind of 4 quite large coaches, which take up a lot of space for I could otherwise use for other things. But yeah, I've still got that. The only other non-Steam models I've got is there was an old member of the user group Brickish. He was kind of retiring from the hobby, so he was selling some of his models. So I picked up a couple of his things, which are 6 wide. One of them is a Class 31 diesel, and the other is a tamper machine, which is quite interesting and unique. So I'm quite happy to have them sort of on show sometimes as well. Might have a play with them as well. Yeah, that's all of the non-Steam stuff, but everything else is British steam engines through and through for me.
I never knew that you had a tamper machine. Even if it isn't built by you, I never knew that. I don't think I've seen it. Do you
Yeah,
well,
as I say, those ones, it's a bit like my electric train. They don't go out to shows much because I tend to just focus on the steam locos I built more recently, and because I travel to shows via public transport, so I'm normally quite limited in how much I can carry, and therefore, yeah, the tamper tend to get left behind. But at the moment, it's powered just by a single 9-volt train motor, and what I was tempted to do was kind of retrofit the model with powered up. Firstly, so I can run it on plastic track, which would be good for shows, but also I can fit it with the powered up color sensor, and I could use it to have kind of like an automatic shuttle going backwards and forwards. I think that would be quite fun.
I am not surprised when you mentioned 9 volt. I think you are one of the few people who sit on this mount because there's a lot of people that still wish 9 volt stuck around. So who is it that's making the custom 9 volt compatible stuff again?
Yeah, so at the moment, the main company making the sort of custom 9-volt stuff is FX Bricks or FX Track, and that's headed up by a guy called Michael Gale in Canada. And fortunately, some of us have managed to get hold of it in the UK, even though it wasn't the easiest with all of the shipping and Brexits and all that. But yeah, it's a really good quality stuff. It's basically the same quality as the original 9-volt track. And then they're also looking to build additional things like new motors and controllers. So the fact that it's keeping the 9-volt side of the hobby alive is quite amazing to me, because obviously when they stopped producing official Lego 9-volts, everyone was switching to power functions and then powered up. It felt like 9-volt was kind of the dinosaur of the hobby then. But I still really like 9-volts just for the sake of it not having to worry about batteries and the fact that the motor is very easy to integrate into lots of different trains.
Yeah, that battery issue was definitely something that I experienced recently. Having done the Bristol Brick Show, I had a mountain of spare batteries on standby, thinking, no, I'm not going to need to touch this until Sunday because it was a 2-day show. 3 hours into Saturday, I'm thinking, oh god, all the batteries are starting to go, and I knew for a fact that if I had 9-volt, this would not be an issue at all. So I think just the power system itself by default is what makes it supreme.
Yeah, I mean, I have certainly started adapting towards battery powered stuff as well, particularly ever since I joined LNUR and started running on lots of layouts, which are only plastic track. And you do get a lot of versatility out of the battery powered stuff, but at the same time, as you say, managing batteries is a bit of a feat. Either you end up with a mountain of disposable batteries, or you're having to constantly worry about charging your lipos or whatever.
That's something I really want to try and fiddle around with in the future. I'm not brave enough to get a LiPo to power one of my models. I know that there's a couple of guys who have. I think fellow member Joe has, and there's a guy, I believe Liam Biggs has done that as well. He
I think so,
has,
yes.
yeah, he made a model of Tornado, and I remember seeing some, I suppose, like behind the scenes pictures of where it crashed off the table, and you can see
Oh, yes.
inside the boiler and in the tender, they had, you could just see a bunch of tiny wires and a massive lipo battery powering it all. It's like, oh, that's why it's so strong all of a sudden.
Indeed, yeah. I remember seeing that model quite distinctly, and he's got a lot of good tricks in there. Does he have a smoke generator in there as well? He might do.
Not in
It
the
seems like that sort of
well,
model.
I don't think it was in his Tornado. He made an LMS Duchess class recently, and I
Hmm.
think it's that one that has the smoke generator. But it's still a
Yeah.
very nice piece. As there is a website that I'll get it up now because I do have it saved. But there is a website that allows you to buy the Steam module itself on its own. It's Power Functions compatible, and I saw it in person for the first time at the Brick Express Lego show I did at the end of May.
Hmm.
So the website, I'll leave a link to the website in the description. It's called thebrickpeople.square.site. It's
All
about
right.
15
Cheers.
or so pounds, but it's a nifty little thing. It's something that appeared in Mold King sets first, but the fact that you can buy it on its own is really cool. I've never gone ahead with buying one yet because I don't really know what sort of model I can use this with. But the fact that it exists as its own standalone product is so cool.
It's simply something that I might think about having a go at. Yeah, just because it's, yeah, as you say, really a cool addition to a model. So it's one of those that just takes water and kind of vaporizes it. So you don't have to worry about heat or oil or any of that stuff. So that's good. So it's interesting you said about Liam Biggs's Tornado model, actually, because back in 2021, we had the Brick Train Awards, the previous year to the one we've just had. And that was the year that I entered my model of Tornado. And I think there was at least two others who also inputted a model of Tornado, one of them being Liam Biggs's. And I have to say, if you look at Liam Biggs's model, I think it's done in 8 wide scale. I think the proportions are actually better than mine, particularly as he used much larger wheels and he managed to find a way to kind of have them going to like just through the running board. That's probably one of the main things I'm not quite so happy about my version. But then at the same time, Liam also uses quite a few custom parts like 3D printed or modded. So that's maybe something that the judges weren't so keen on them. Maybe why they went for mine instead, because mine ended up winning the European Steam Awards for that, which I was quite happy about. But yeah, definitely great stuff that Liam's done with his stuff as well.
Again, like you said, I remember seeing a load of Tornado models being entered for that year.
Yeah, there's always one or two models where you tend to get a few different or duplicates. Like everyone knows, the Polar Express is quite a popular engine, and I'm sure we've had at least a few of those entered into the awards over the years.
Well, we are on our way to Christmas as well, so there's no doubt we're going to see a bunch more appear online. So, what is your favourite model that you have built so far?
Ah, right. Now this is a tricky question for sure. I normally say that my favorite model is kind of my most recent one, because I tend to think that I'm always trying to learn and improve my techniques. My most recent model as of today is actually my crane tank, which is very different to a lot of the other models I've made. For those that haven't seen it, my crane tank is a very small loco, which is using the circuit cubes kit to power it, and it's got like basically it's a tank engine with a crane on top, and it uses the circuit cubes to motorize the different features, so you can move the crane about. So it was a very fun project, but I don't think it has quite the same, at least to me, the impressiveness of some of my other larger engines. So I'd say at the moment, my favorite loco is probably my purple Bullied, which some people might be familiar with. So basically, this year, 2021, it was the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And to celebrate this, one of the preserved railways in the UK decided to paint their loco bright purple, which certainly caught a lot of attention.
Yeah, there were lots
from the
of
public.
happy and unhappy people about that. Did you like
Absolutely,
it?
yeah.
I was so happy to see it's a custom fictional livery. Doesn't matter what the occasion is to me personally. Just the fact that they went ahead and did that, I loved it.
I'm in the same boat. Yeah, I really liked it as well. I mean, firstly, Bullieds are my favourite type of engine in real life, at least. So anything to do with Bullied Pacifics is always going to grab my attention. But the fact that they went ahead with this painting it purple, just kind of because they could, and it was a brilliant marketing strategy as well for the railway. And I already had a design for a very similar model because I'd already built a Merchant Navy class, the rebuilt version. So it's not the spam can. It doesn't have the flat sides. It's kind of more conventional in shape. And then I thought, well, if I've already got that design, I can literally just convert it to purple, and I'll pretty much have the right engine. And then so I embarked on that about, I don't know, March or so of 2022, thinking it was going to be quite a quick job. And I ended up spending probably about 3 or 4 months actually just tweaking the design constantly, basically finding all the areas of the old design I could improve, to the point where I basically rebuilt the whole thing, which is a bit ridiculous. Because I was making it the purple, I obviously had to make sure the parts were available in the right color. So that took a bit of time. Interesting to note is I chose dark purple, as in Lego's dark purple color, because that was the one that was just available in the right colors, even though some of the other of Lego's colors might have been more accurate. But yeah, dark purple is surprisingly easy to build in, so that's what I went with. And I finally built it. I finished it in sort of late summer. Eventually, I was very very fortunate because the loco is based at the Severn Valley Railway, which is not far from me. I was able to take my model down and get a picture of it sitting on the real thing. The volunteers were very kind and allowed me to do that. So, yeah, that was great fun. So yeah, that's probably going to have to be my pick for my favourite engine. But when I get round to my next big project, that'll probably become my next favourite engine for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a common answer where people say, "Oh, the one that I did recently, that's my new favorite," and I'm definitely like that as well. Where I've made a model, I go, "Oh, it's I got a new toy to play with, basically, so this is my new favorite." So that sentiment there is definitely common amongst other builders. And I remember as well just going onto Flickr every now and then and just seeing another work in progress picture for your Tor Valley model, just seeing maybe a couple more parts added, maybe just a close up of a couple of sections that have been slightly tweaked. Again, it did seem like a very lengthy process to go from the initial idea, finding all the parts, and seeing it in person at the members' weekend as well. It felt like an eternity just slowly seeing this progress online.
To be honest, there were some kind of real life things that delayed the project as well, particularly going on holiday to America for 2 weeks and then getting COVID after that. So that was all great fun. But yeah, I probably could have finished it a bit quicker if I'd really given it a push. But in the end, I just took my time with it. And then, of course, once it was built, we then had the unfortunate instance that the Queen, who was kind of the whole reason for building this model, she sadly passed away, and so the engine kind of took on a whole new meaning as more of a sort of memorial to her. And then I noticed that the Severn Valley Railway was making tweaks to the loco to pay respects, like making the nameplates black, that sort of thing. So of course I then took the opportunity to change my model to match that as well, just as a kind of keeping it going.
It was also interesting when you said you chose Lego's Dark Purple specifically because of the parts that are available. I'm in a similar camp where I would love to try and build a model using a shade of light blue, but because
Hmm.
I've never really properly built in light blue before, I don't really know what parts are available. And I don't want to have to go through, like, spending a whole day on Bricklink going through the 4 or 5 different shades of light blue just to see what parts are available in that color, to see if it's possible to make a particular model in that color. So yeah, I no doubt it must have been difficult for you to find all the parts in that color that you needed.
I can definitely offer some advice on the light blue front because I've actually built quite a significant model in a lighter blue. Those who follow my stuff on Flickr might be familiar with the fact that, as well as trains, I do dabble in other stuff, and I've built quite a large sculpture of a My Little Pony character, and I've built that in the medium blue color from Lego or on
Yeah.
Bricklink. I found that to have quite a decent part availability. Because again, there was maybe some other colours that might have been more accurate, like there's, I don't know, cyans, and I can't remember what the others are called, but yeah, medium blue I definitely recommend.
Yeah, there's light blue, light bright blue, medium azure, medium. But it's just it's so unnecessary. Just please, one shade of light blue, please. I would love it as
Yeah,
well if
it
Lego
does
could
make you wonder
just
why Lego have got so many different variants, and particularly like I think medium blue is very similar to a colour they made called Maersk blue, because of like the Maersk ships they've built.
yeah.
Although I think, funnily enough, when they built one of their more recent models of the Maersk ship, they didn't even use Maersk blue. They used like a different blue. So it's like, what was really the point of that?
I would love it if Lego could just do. You know how Lego just have this. Calling it a set is a bit of a strong word, but it's just a parts kit. You know, a box of, I don't know, a couple of hundred parts, a couple of plates. There's like I don't know, 100 red pieces, 100 blue pieces, 100 green pieces. It's all miscellaneous parts, but there's still loads of parts in a bunch of colors, easy and ready to use. I would love it if we could get a couple of, even if it's just a smaller box, I don't know, for like £10, it's only got like 100 parts in or something like that, where it's just colors that aren't commonly used, just to get more people familiar with those colors.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Lego have done kind of generic parts packs before, but they've always been in quite the traditional primary colours, like your reds, blues, blacks, whites, yellows,
Mm.
etc. Not the more obscure colours that actually the ones people really need.
So, have you displayed your models at a Lego show before? And if so, what is your best slash favorite Lego show experience as a displayer?
Right, so yes, I definitely have displayed quite a lot of shows over the years. In fact, my first Lego show I did was back in 2008. So I've been quite a long time member of the user group Brickish, which is kind of the whole for the whole of the UK. And the first show I got to do was called Brighton Model World, down on the south coast, and I basically took just like one train along to run on one of the layouts which was there. Met a few people who I'm still friends with, like David Tabner, and I've basically been going since then. There's never been any particular period where I've stopped exhibiting. I've done quite a good variety of different shows over the years. I tend to do maybe between 3 and 5 shows a year if I can. Not as many as other people, but also, yeah, I try and keep it up. In terms of favourite shows I've done, the best shows for me are where we get to exhibit at a place that's also like a railway, has a railway theme to it, shall we say. So, for example, I've done quite a few shows at the London Transport Museum in London at their Acton depot, where you're surrounded by all sorts of wonderful London Underground stuff like old tube trains. I've done a few at steam railways like the Gloucestershire and Warwickshire Railway and the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre. And then, of course, one which is usually a highlight of the year is what's known as Steam in Swindon, which is the Great Western Brick Show. I've been doing that for so long, but when I first started doing that show, actually, it was known as the Great Western Lego Show because it was so far back. But that was when Lego still allowed people to actually use their Lego name in the shows before they started clamping down on that for legal reasons. as far as favorite shows overall, just the ones where I get to meet lots of fellow train fans and run my trains on different layouts. Yeah, they're the best.
Any particular standout experience during one show where you met someone in particular or you saw a particular display?
I'm not sure about. I can pick any sort of just one favorite, to be honest. Getting to meet loads of people. One of my best experiences. It wasn't as a train place actually, but the first time I met a lot of people from LNUR was when I did the North Notts Brick Show, which is kind of like a outskirts of Nottingham. Even I had to go via Sheffield to get there, and I just took a load of trains to just display statically on a table, but then spent pretty much the whole show just chatting to LNUR guys and getting to run my trains on their layout. So that was a nice experience.
It was very interesting that you said you've been doing shows for as long as you have, because I've actually just remembered something. The very first Lego show I went to as a viewer, I haven't bought a ticket. It was the one in Swindon. It was 2016,
Hmm.
and that was technically the first time I sort of met you, because I remember me and my dad going to where you were displaying. I've got the footage in an old vlog somewhere, but I remember getting a bit of a close up to your models, and me and my dad were pointing at it. Going, oh, so he's done it this way. Look at this, and he's done it. He's got this technique going, and
Yep.
it was. I don't think I had sort of seen you online at that, because this was years ago as well.
Mm.
But just because the first time I met you properly was Swindon earlier this year. It
It
was
was,
it was a
yes.
brief introduction, but it was kind of crazy. Just remember going back a couple of years. Oh my god, I've actually technically I've met you before, but this is the first time I'm properly saying hello.
I can't remember what sort of thing I was doing in 2016 because over the years of doing that show, I've kind of joined up with various different people, different layouts. So I've done a few with David Tabner, for example, and then in the earliest years, it was some of the other guys who aren't really doing layouts anymore.
I also remember when you said Great Western Lego Show. Amazingly, I can remember going that far back where I don't remember when, at least for Swindon, I don't remember when it switched from Great Western Lego Show to Great Western Brick Show, but I've always remembered it as Great Western Lego Show. So I'm only 24,
That's
but
funny.
at the same time, that kind of shows my age, which is a bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, for those who aren't familiar with the history of that show, it was the first one they did was just one layout. Um, it wasn't like taking over the whole museum or the whole hall. And that was a layout run by a group called the North British Lego Train Club. It's a club that I don't think it really exists anymore, and I guess LNUR has kind of become the successor to that. But so I think initially it was called the Great Western Lego Train Show, and then as it expanded to have not just trains but all sorts of other stuff, then it dropped the train part, and then eventually had to drop the Lego part as well to just become Great Western Brick Show.
Swindon is always a reliably good brick show. It was a shame. Well, for 2020, they called it off, which made sense. And for a good while, they were set to go in 2021. And when I got the news that they eventually decided to cancel the show, it was a bit of a shame, because from 2016, I did 16, 17, 18, and 19, coming as a visitor, that is. And it was, again, always a reliably brilliant show. So to go back this year with so many railway themed displays, because you and I build train focused models, it was really exciting to see that. There were so many people there that I knew as well, and just the vast sheer size of it, so much going on. It was just so amazing to be back in that environment.
Yeah, I have to say I agree. It was really great being back at Swindon this year, particularly as obviously you say the previous 2 years were cancelled due to COVID, and then as well as that, I actually skipped 2019 because Steam tends to always clash with another event I've been interested in each year, which is one of the Railway Steam Galas. So I did 2018, and then thought, oh well, I'll just have 1 year off, and then surely it'll be back in 2020. Haha. So yeah, it was
Famous
the
last
first time coming
words.
back in 3 years, and yeah, it was brilliant.
So this is a question that I introduced a few episodes ago, and it's probably going to be the question that gets the most different answers. But what is your ideal Lego train set?
Right, train sets. I think there's a couple of different ways you could go about or think about this because it would either be a train set designed specifically for me, or it would be what I think is the best train set Lego should actually produce. So I guess I could think about both. Starting with sort of my ideal train set for me would be like a nice, really detailed steam engine model in essence. Um, and unfortunately, we kind of were teased with almost getting that this year because of course, they announced that they were doing the Ultimate Collector's Hogwarts Express model,
Yeah.
and the previous year to that, they released the Crocodile set, which was exactly the kind of set I'd be after, which because it was a very detailed model done in 7 wide, and it didn't have too many other things going with it apart from just the track. And then the set itself wasn't too expensive. I think it was like just over £100, which don't get me wrong, is still a decent amount of money, but it's not ridiculous. And then there was, even though it was already a decent model, there was also scope to kind of make little tweaks and motorize it and stuff. So if they'd have done that as the same style of set with the Hogwarts Express, that would have been kind of my ideal set, really, or any other kind of British steam engine done in the same way. But sadly, as we know, they went in a kind of different direction with the Hogwarts Express in the end, and made it the like the bigger scale with the station, etc. Wasn't so keen on that. But as far as what I actually think Lego should make as a train set, then I think it'll be much more along the lines of kind of your first ever train set, like to start off someone who's just getting into the hobby. So you'd have a loop of track, and then all the means to power the train, and then the train itself would be an engine and a few wagons. But I think the main difference from what they actually produce at the moment is it would be better to have the train is actually a model of something more realistic, a representation of a real train from somewhere. Because at the moment, the sets they kind of release each year are more a generic passenger train and a generic freight train. And at the same time, they give you the parts to power it up, but they don't even give you the controller. They rely on you using your phone with the app. And I can see the arguments as to why everyone has phones these days, but at the same time, I think if the physical controller's there, you should really be giving it to them so everything's in one box. I think that's one of the most important things is if you want to introduce someone to the Lego train hobby, give them everything they need and something that's good quality and will inspire them to do more with it.
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting and I think the most sensible answer, to be honest, because I've got the 2018 City cargo train set, and I think that came because that was the first train set that Lego made to introduce the power up system, and I think
Yeah.
that was the set that came with the controller because I know I've got one. I remember my dad got the Disney train. I don't remember. Did the Disney train come with power up stuff?
Yeah, so the Disney train came with the hub, but it didn't come with the controller. But you're right. I think the first couple of sets that didn't powered up did have the controller, but since then they've dropped it maybe, unless they've had it in the most recent sets and I've missed that.
Well, I haven't. Well, I've not really paid that much attention to the city sets that came out this year, earlier in the summer. I can only. I just can't remember. It wouldn't be surprising if they didn't come with a controller. But yeah, I think you're definitely along the right lines in the sense that, just a little bit of everything would be good. But with the power system in particular, give them everything they need. It definitely reminds me of a couple of other things I've seen in the past where people just go, "Oh, you've got phones, right?" It's not the answer you should be going with. Yes, people have phones, but they're not going to be using it for something which is pretty much inconvenient. You're halfway through playing with your train set, but all of a sudden you get a call or a text or something that disrupts the play. That's definitely not what you should really go with. I said previously, the My Own Train series is definitely something I would love to see come back, but that's the yeah, like you mentioned, having mentioned both answers, what's good for you and what's good for new people. The My Own Train series are definitely good for me, but I think it would be cool to see something along the lines of, you got your generic passenger or cargo train set in the city line, and now you've got an extensive, a little bit more expensive version of that, where it's much more realistic in a dedicated trains theme. I think that would definitely be the way to go.
In terms of the my own train stuff, I definitely think they should be thinking about offering say standalone wagons as a different separate set because that's a clear route to people expanding their collection in a not particularly expensive way. I feel like my own train got that sort of thing really right, but I don't know how well it's sold in the end.
Yeah, I think there was some people every now and then I do bring it up, and I think at some point somebody mentions, "Oh, it failed because it didn't sell well." I think that's definitely part in why it's not still going today, and I think the train theme as a whole is still not going today. But at the same time, I still believe that if you gave it another, there are obviously a lot of people that want to see more Lego train sets, but it's the issue with, I think it's just because Lego themselves aren't making enough. There are other brick toy manufacturers out there with plenty of train sets. Mold King comes to mind, where they got a load of train sets just out of the blue, and they look really good. I know that Blue Bricks have a good amount of sets. There's a couple of other companies that names escape me, but I think it's just because Lego themselves, because it doesn't have the Lego name to it, not that many people are keen to purchase sets and kind of go towards making their own models, which leads to desire for more sets. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, this, because again, the desire is really there, but I don't think anybody could really settle, or like a group like the Lego Train fandom itself couldn't really settle on what the next train set should be for people to really get interested in it.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone will have their own opinions on that as well. And another thing I also want to bring up is if you think that someone's buying a train set for the first time, the competition isn't just going to be other Lego sets. It's going to be your more conventional model train sets as well. Something like a Hornby starter set or a Bachmann set. And I know that they don't have the same play value as Lego in terms of being able to build it and then convert it. But I think that those other sets can also offer a lot more value for money in terms of the quality of the train you get, and the fact that you get the track with the power going through it and the mains controller and all that sort of stuff. I think it's something to take into account. So going back to the Hogwarts Express, Hornby make a set where you get a very realistic Hogwarts Express loco and a couple of carriages. It's got a working light on the front. You get a full loop of track with a controller, and I think even a station. And all of that is for a fraction of the price of that Hogwarts Express Lego set. It does make you wonder kind of where people would actually go.
I'm actually quite glad that you mentioned Hornby, in the sense that it's a different model gauge altogether. So I think it was about this time last year where I uploaded a 40-minute video talking about why a dedicated Lego train theme won't return. And I made numerous points, and one point, I'm pretty sure I said this, but if people are interested in model trains, they'll probably just stick to the model side of things, not necessarily Lego. Trying to convert people from one gauge to another is going to be very difficult because of all the money they have invested, and the time and energy as well into that gauge that they've basically dedicated themselves to. So if they haven't got the desired Lego train set, they're probably going to go, okay, I'll probably move to, again, Hornby. And then 10 years down the line, when Lego finally decide to release something that's worthwhile, a lot of people are going to look at that and go, well, you're too late.
There's another interesting point on that actually. Is I remember distinctly the year I got my very first Lego train set for my birthday. I think it was either my 7th or 8th set, and this is in the sort of mid to late 90s. And I had the choice of either having a Lego train set or a Playmobil train set. And the Playmobil trains that they used to produce, I don't know if they produce any now, they were basically more toy-like versions of G-scale model trains you can get. So it uses basically the standard size track for that, the sort of track that people use when they build garden railways. I think the fact that you have that compatibility between the toy brand and conventional model train scales. It's probably a big plus for them. And it is quite a disadvantage for Lego that we have this unique gauge that doesn't translate. And it does make me wonder if I'd chosen Playmobil over Lego that fateful birthday, I'd have gone down a completely different route for like the whole hobby of like getting into G scale or gauge one realistic trains, whereas obviously I went down the Lego route instead and haven't gone back since.
Yeah, definitely. There is an alternate universe out there where TechnoAndrew has a gauge one garden layout.
Absolutely, yeah, I can see that.
I'm very curious
Okay.
to see what I'm very curious to see what future guests will say to that to that question, because like I said before I asked, this is probably going to be the one where everybody's going to have different answers. So yeah, I'm very keen to see what other people think about this, without starting a whole Twitter or Reddit thread about what do you think is the best Lego train sets, because that will probably be a never-ending, not so much a conversation, but probably an argument. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah, it'd certainly be interesting to see what some of the other guests who come on have to say about the matter.
Okay, so for my next question, do you have a favourite or standout Lego train builder that you are following online?
All right, yeah, so there's definitely plenty of great builders out there who I enjoy seeing their work. To get it out of the way, obviously we've got to talk about British Bricks. Sam over in Australia, he's been doing some fantastic stuff over the last few years.
I think his name has come up on every podcast so far.
Indeed, yeah, and for good reason, for sure. And then to stick with the Australian theme, actually, probably the builder I'm most impressed with and kind of idolise the most is Alex McCook. The stuff he comes out with is just incredible. The detail he gets in, the mechanisms he produces for all sorts of different scales and gauges, even, something to aspire to. And I was very fortunate to meet him on a video call for the first time earlier this year, because we were both being judges on the most recent Brick Train Awards. Yeah, big respect to Alex there. There's plenty of other builders I follow online. Just to name a few, there's Seth Bricked, Scott Nick, Wes Turngate. Yeah, I feel like there was kind of a wave of younger builders that came up about, I don't know, 5 or so years ago that have all been doing fantastic stuff. Actually, great on them. And then, of course, there's a lot of people I know through the clubs like LNUR, who I also think do fantastic work. Even yourself, of course, with all of your different builds. Yeah, there's so much to get inspired by. In terms of when I was like first getting started into the hobby, this is obviously going back quite a while. This is kind of back to the early 2000s or so. I remember particularly there's a guy called James Mathis. He might be the one who's actually written the book on Lego trains, if I'm not mistaken. I think he built some great stuff that I saw. This is back in the days where like Brick Shelf was the place you went to see all your Lego train images.
Oh
So
my
that kind of
god,
dates
Brick
it.
Shelf. I actually remember that.
Brick Shelf. And the funny thing is that it's pretty much as it was back then to this day, Brick Shelf, in terms of the website. So there's that. And then as I started looking into the UK scene, I mentioned them earlier, but the North British Lego Train Club, the ones that used to do the original Steam display, yeah, a lot of those guys definitely inspired me. People like Jason Railton, John, who's now part of LNUR, he built some great stuff. Hugh Millington, Martin, all those guys, yeah. But there was also this guy over in America. I think he's called Ross Neal. He built some like quite impressive models back in the day. He built this 8-wide Hogwarts Express and the Polar Express as well. So two of the kind of classic subjects to build. But yeah, he was another one that stood out to me.
I was just thinking as well about the guy who wrote the Lego Train book. I don't know, I'm probably misremembering, but I think he's the same guy who made his own version of the crocodile locomotive. I remember going on Flickr, I think this was, soon after I bought my one, just looking at other people's versions of that locomotive. I think it was Holger Mathis. I'm probably butchering the name, but even then that might not be the right person I'm thinking of. But it was a mock of the crocodile locomotive, very similar to the one that came out in 2020. A video of it running on track on Flickr. And I thought, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. He's modified his version of the set to make it how it is. And I checked the video details underneath, and it was uploaded like 5-10 years ago. So my mind was kind of exploding and imploding at the same time, thinking, hang on a minute, did he buy that set? Did he go back in time? Did he predict the future? Like, what? It was quite insane because it was so close to the Lego set that we got a few years ago. It was insane. But yeah, there's definitely so many builders that have a lot of great talent.
Yeah, I might have been getting confused with the names, unfortunately, in terms of it might have been Holger Mathis instead of James, if I was getting that wrong. Apologies if so. That reminds me also, there was a few other guys in America who I was quite keen on following. Anthony Sava, you might have heard of him.
Oh, yes. I love his T1 so much.
And then, yeah, nowadays, obviously, people like Kale and Glenn, I also like seeing their work. it's impossible to name everyone, but I've tried
Yeah,
my
there's
best.
just so many people. I want to give another shout out as well to Hod Carrier on Flickr.
Oh yes,
So
definitely.
every now and then I'll see a new, like his latest project. I'll see what he's been up to, and every now I don't know what makes me do this, but I look at his model of the GT3, and every time I do, that sort of like like in a video game when you have a bar or a meter in the bottom of the screen that slowly fills up. I've got one of those one of those bars that's like a temptation meter. It's like maybe I want to build a GT3, not quite yet. A few days later, I'll look at the picture again. Maybe I really do want to. So yeah, I think I'm getting closer to building a GT3 at some point because his model, it's like an 8 wide model. It looks so good.
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember seeing that one. Like even the fact that it's mostly brown, but it's got some dark green areas on it, which is like a really nice touch.
It's a really interesting mix, brown being the main color of the locomotive, but I think it's, yeah, the use of dark green, it just matches quite well because it's darker colors. Oh, speaking of the GT3, I believe it was
Hmm.
KR Models who made a version of the another very weird experimental diesel in real life called the Fell, the
Oh yes.
10100. I think British Bricks is on his way to making one of those, but I remember seeing the model for the first time on YouTube in a review, and I thought that looks insane. And if I was ever going to build a diesel, it would probably be that. I love
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Go on, sorry.
diesels in the the early age of diesels where everything, well, I suppose just experimental stuff in the first place because it's always so unique and wacky. But I love that there's just 8 wheels on both sides connected with the whole single drive rod. It's a diesel, but it has this weird shape and I'm not a diesel builder, but I think that above all diesels is what I'm tempted to build.
Yeah, the Fail Loco is certainly very unique, and yeah, definitely around that period there was lots of experimentation, as you say, and people they just didn't really know what they were doing in essence in terms of what a diesel loco might look like going forwards. That Fail Loco is actually particularly interesting to me because that was built in Derby, which is where I now live as a city in the UK. And there's actually quite a famous photograph of the Fail Loco standing in Derby Station, and in the background is basically where my office building where I work now is. So it definitely all feels quite local to me.
Is it like a black and white picture or like a sketch or is it like, is it a proper picture?
I think it's a black and white photograph at that point.
Okay, I am now at my final question. What projects do you have in the works and what models do you hope to build in the future?
I don't really have a particular project that I'm really focusing on at the moment. Since I kind of finished my most recent projects like the crane tank and things a month or so ago, I've kind of gone into a bit of a dip at the moment where I'm trying to work out what I want to build next. It's funny you should ask this actually, because literally last night at the time of recording, I thought up another project which I quite like the look of, and so I've spent a bit of time kind of sketching it out in studio, I guess you could say, and I think that might be something that we'll be seeing soon. I guess a bit of a teaser is, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of pretty much all of the trains I build at the moment are in 7 wide scale, 7 studs wide. But I know a lot of people, particularly in LNUR, have been pushing to head more towards the 8 wide side of the scale because of just the convenience of working in an even number of studs, I guess. But also because it's the bigger scale, it's easy to get more detail, that sort of thing in. Even though I always model in 7 wide at the moment, I've always wanted to just kind of go for it and give 8 wide a go, just for the hell of it, just to see what it's like. And it just so happens that literally yesterday, a particular idea for a project caught my eye, and I think actually this might be the one. It's a tank engine, I'll say that much, but I think I might finally take the plunge and build something in 8 wide.
So, yeah, when it comes to 8 wide building, it was quite remarkable in the sense that I remember going from 6 wide to 7 wide. I think it was at the start of 2020. The first 7 wide model I made was of my P2. It needed so much refining, but I was just amazed at, just going 1 stud wider allowed so much more to be done. And I also remember having that same revelation going from 7 wide to 8 wide. And I thought, it's just, again, like you said, with building at an even number, you don't have to worry about buying 200 jumper plates for your models.
Oh
and a
God,
bunch
yes,
of a bunch
that's
of
definitely the story
three.
of my hobby so far is as many jumper plates as you can fit in a room.
Yeah, that and having to buy a bunch of 2x3 or any 3 wide plates just for the model to sit on.
Yes, absolutely. And then when you're trying to work out how to like build a coach and attach the coach to the bogies, it's like, how do you do this in 7 wide?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge, but I said this to some people every now and then when people talk about scale and what scale and size and width do you build to? I will always jump in and say just go 8 wide because I've gone from 6 to 7 and I've gone from 7 to 8. It's again, getting just that little bit more detail in that extra stud of space. Again, that extra stud of space from 6 to 7 was one thing, but the extra stud from 7 to 8 is something else. It really does allow a lot more to be done with a model. So I have said to some people, just jump into the deep end, build 8 wide because it really visually it doesn't look that different to a 7 wide model, but it really does benefit from having that extra stud because you can get more things done, and it is ultimately simpler because you can use an 8 wide plate for the base of something and just connect everything from there instead of having to balance things on jumper plates and a bunch of 3 wide plates.
Yeah, I mean, probably the main reason why I haven't taken the plunge up to this point is basically because of the exhibiting side. So taking my models to shows. It's not really been the case in the last few years with LNUR, but going back towards my earlier years, particularly when I joined up with David Taberner on a lot of his layouts, it was partly because an 8 wide train just wouldn't fit down the platforms because of the way the platforms are built, and also because a lot of the other trains that were being run were only 6 wide. And as you know, putting a 6 wide train next to an 8 wide train really doesn't work out very well.
Nah.
Whereas if it's only a 1 star difference, like 6 and 7 or 7 and 8, it's not as noticeable. But yeah, thankfully, in more recent years, with like the LNUR layouts and even other layouts that have started to go down the routes, they've been building their platforms with more generous clearances, shall we say?
Yeah.
That's made it a lot more feasible. And then also the wider curves is also a massive difference because obviously going back, we didn't have any of the URI R72s, R88s. It was all just R40. And of course, going 8 wide means much longer stock as well, which just didn't really go well with the tighter curves. But I think the opportunity has just been getting wider and wider in recent years. So that's why I'm starting to think actually now's the time.
That's very sensible that you say that. And I think it was you who shared a video somewhere. Again, I think it was you, but there was a video uploaded by YouTuber Sam's Trains where he was testing double O gauge track. I think it was like just a flexible piece of track, and the curve that he was making was getting smaller and smaller. And
Oh yes.
again, I think it was you, but you basically when you posted or shared the video rather, you made in the post. It's a bit shocking to remind us. Given how big the Lego train scale of track is, of that's basically a really sharp corner. Because when you look at other gauges, double O gauge was a prime example with that video that Sam did, where it's basically that the equivalent of an R40 Lego track curve for double O gauge was crazy small, and yet
Indeed, yeah.
it looked so familiar because the model he was using to go around that corner was a model of Smokey Joe, and just seeing the
Mm.
overhang on a tank engine on the front and the back going around such a sharp corner, yes, it made the turn, but it's like I've seen that so many times with Lego curves because they're just naturally really sharp. So it's like, oh man.
I think the thing that really stood out to me is when you look at the like a double O gauge, the standard curves that Hornby make, and they have this sort of set different sizes like R1, R2, etc. But even the smallest standard curve, which was R1, like in physical terms, that curve was still a larger radius than the Lego track R40. Not in terms of like the scale radius, but the real world radius of the piece of model track. The double O gauge one was a bigger radius than the Lego one. It's like, yeah, this really shows how tight the Lego ones are. It was interesting though when I posted. I remember posting that video on one of our forums. Some of the people in the group did make the points that actually the tighter curves of Lego, even though it's more unrealistic, it is also a bit of a a draw to some people, where you can build layouts in a more confined space, of course. But then I think people are also making the point that it has almost a charm to it as a model train or toy train setup to have those tighter curves. Yeah, people weren't torn. That's the right word. But yeah, I think from my personal perspective, larger curves are the way to go.
Yeah, I'm very happy that we live in a world where larger radius curves for Lego trains exist, because I really don't think I would, or many people in fact, would have the models that they would have if R40 was the only curve track pieces that were available in the hobby.
Yeah, and when I'm designing my new models, I'm always going to try and make them so they actually can run on R40, because I think, well, I'm just used to doing that by this point, and I think it just means that you're guaranteed to be able to run it on any layouts that you might happen to bring your model to at a show. That doesn't mean that yeah, they don't look better when they're going on the wider radius track. Even particularly now that we've got the 9-volt stuff from FX bricks that we talked about earlier, that was something that I always dreamed of. I never thought would happen, to have like a properly made injection molded piece with the 9-volt metal strips on at a larger radius. Is a dream come true, really.
Yeah, having mentioned being able to run things on R40s, my ultimate test when it comes to making a model is I will just have a standard Lego switch set up to go from the main line onto the siding. If it can do that sort of S curve, because I think that's the tightest curve you can do with normal Lego track. Like a normal, like if you were to use two R40 curves to make an S bit anyways, I think that's one thing. But I think, I'm probably wrong in saying this, but I think the point switch, again, a standard Lego R40 point switch going from the main straight into the siding, I think that is the tightest curve on any Lego track available. So my ultimate test when it comes to making a model is if it can clear that bit without derailing, I'm good to go. That means it can run on pretty much any layout.
Absolutely, yeah. The S curve is always the hardest test of the loco's ability to navigate all sorts of track, and because of the kind of offset you get between vehicles as it goes through the S curve. So yeah, as you say, if it can go through the standard R40 points, then you pretty much conquered everything.
Speaking of S curves, if anybody here hasn't seen the latest video on the LUKR Club YouTube channel, during our members meets, we had a bunch of trains running. We had loads of layouts together. It was so much fun. And member Joe had his Deltic model going with 11 coaches on the northern layout. And the northern layout has two S curves in it. And it was so bizarre, because I can't think of what the word was I used at the time. Just see his Deltic model pulling 11 coaches, going full speed, going over an S curve, and there was no derailing. It was, I think the radius of the curves were R72 or R88. It was like a wider radius S curve, anyways. But just to see it kind of snake over the S curve and continue round the loop full pelt, I was just stunned. It was so cool. Go and check it out because it's a really cool clip.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of good fun. And yeah, that Deltic model Joe's built is an absolute beast.
I think he's got
Fitting
it
of the
lined.
original.
Yeah, I think he's got it lined now. I think he brought it with him to Bristol Brick Show. I can't remember if he got it lined at that point, because the some members of the Southern Club were able to make it to that show as well. But since I was displaying there as well, it was really difficult for me to come down and say hello to them. Again, I can't remember if he's lined it or not. So he probably has, and I'm just misremembering. But it really does look like a beastie diesel, like a really chunky. I love a Lego train model that looks so chunky, the sort of thing where you can just wrap your hand around and pick it up, and you know it's not gonna like break or anything. I don't know. It's a weird fetish thing from me. It's like a really weird thing for me to say, but it's just. I love the chunkiness in a model so much. It's like my favorite thing, to be able to make it so it's just so it's not going to break. I could just pick it up with one hand, keep it in my hand, look around it, and go, yeah, that's cool. It's like a weird, again, like a weird feeling. I don't really know where it came from, but it's one that's kind of just stuck around.
I think that's probably one of the other things where I'm thinking about having a go at the 8-wide stuff as well, is because it has the extra chunkiness that you don't get in 7-wide. And I've noticed this when we've had both 7-wide and 8-wide stuff running on the LNUR layouts recently. The 8-wide stuff just has a more substantial nature to it. You can really appreciate this thing bombing along the track.
And that is the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining me.
No problem. Happy to be on. It's been nice to chat.
All of the social media pages for TechnoAndrew are in the description, including YouTube, Flickr, and Facebook. And we will BRB with more BRBs. Thank you all ever so much for listening, everyone, and I shall see you all in the next episode. Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye.